All right, just to prove that we cover everybody in college football across the nation, Mark Rogers TV previewing Wake Forest, and I can't do this alone. I got to bring in Mike McDaniel of Inside the ACC to help us out with the poor Demon Deacons. 3-9 in the conference, 1-7 last season. Battled Syracuse, as is expected, is going to happen this season for last place in the tough Atlantic Division. So, Mike, can you help us out on this Wake offense? Let's start there. Dave Clawson, again, trying to rebuild a program that was pretty successful a few years ago that has hit some hard, rough times, and the offense is kind of the microcosm of that.
Yeah, I'll try to help you out here, Mark, but no promises. John Wolford, he's a sophomore quarterback for Wake. Completed 58% of his passes as a true freshman last year, but his 5.6 yards per completion was dead last in the ACC by a pretty nice margin. He had just over 2,000 yards passing, and he started all the games for Wake Forest, so that gives you an idea of just how much his team struggled throwing the ball last year. Cam Serigne is their tight end. He's a redshirt sophomore, very good player. He is the go-to guy and pretty much the only guy that Wolford throws to. He had 54 catches last season for 531 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he's the big-time target for them, if there is one, on their entire offense. They threw for 176.3 yards per game last year. That's 109th in the nation. So they were at the bottom portion of the rankings there. And John Wolford's offensive line, which we'll get to here in a second, but they didn't help him out either. He was sacked 48 times, which was most in college football.
Wow, most in college football. As a freshman, he get beat up like that. I'm going to give Wolford a little bit of a break. I know 5.5 yards per completion, but true freshman, so there's a ceiling there. Maybe he gets better this season. Maybe he gets some help. And obviously, he was dumping the ball down to backs and hitting the tight end underneath quite a bit. So Wake is not going to stretch the field, and there seems to be little hope of that happening coming into this season. So when you get a drive at 80, 85 yards and everything's 3 to 5 yards, it's a tough go when you can't hit 4 big plays downfield. So the running game, you would think, would be reliant with that kind of dismal passing game, but actually the passing game fared better than the running game last season.
Yeah, is it crazy to say that the passing game that ranked 109th in the country was the strength of their offense? It is when the running game is this historically bad. I mean, they hit rock bottom last year. I'm not sure they could do any worse. It only goes up from here. 37% of their runs last year went for no gain or for a loss. So think about that. A college football team couldn't get the ball past the line of scrimmage on running attempts on 37% of their rushes, which is just horrible, however way you slice it. To add on to that, 39.9 yards per game rushing as a team. That's 127th out of 129 teams in the NCAA football bowl subdivision. So they're at the bottom of the barrel rushing, definitely bottom barrel of the Power 5 for sure. They have a sophomore named Dezmond Wortham, and he's an okay player. He just didn't have much help from that offensive line. 240 yards last year as a freshman, and he was their leading rusher. So that gives you an idea. They have 3 returning offensive linemen. You hope that they'll be able to pull together and keep Wolford upright at quarterback. Again, those 48 sacks didn't do the offense any favors, especially when you're getting into a lot of third down and long situations. And when your rushing attack is that poor and you're having trouble moving the ball at all, you're just going to hope that your line shores up a little bit. So their 3 returning stars in offensive line hopefully will, with another year of experience under their belt, they'll come together and hopefully play a little bit better.
Mike, I think I've found a new favorite player in the ACC. I'm going to stick up for this freshman, now sophomore quarterback. I think he had a rough go last year. Freshman thrown into the fire, true freshman, horrible offensive line, no support from the running game, no downfield threats, and they sack him 48 times. So just for him to be walking around in 2015 is a plus. So he comes back for his sophomore season. We'll talk about the defense.
And this is how Wake Forest does it. You have to remember Tanner Price was a predecessor for John Wolford. He had a pretty good career for Wake Forest, and it was the same way for him. He was thrown to the fire as a freshman, and he started all 4 years. So if Wolford just continues to improve, hopefully by the time he's a junior or senior, he'll be a pretty respectable quarterback in the ACC.
There you go. The defense actually wasn't too bad, and considering that the schedule is pretty daunting for this team each and every year because of who they have to play inside the division, and considering when you have to look at the defensive numbers in light of an offense that's continually going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, and setting up defenses at midfield having to defend. So it's pretty remarkable, maybe an overstatement, but that the defense played as well as it did considering the offensive position that they were placed in because of, again, the anemic offense.
Yeah, they returned 7 starters on defense, and like you said, their defense was not bad last year. They were 62nd in the country in points allowed. So, again, they weren't too bad, especially with the precarious situations that the offense put them in at times last year. But with that being said, they are going to have to replace some key guys in the secondary. Kevin Johnson, big-time corner for them over the last couple of years. He's on to the NFL playing for the Houston Texans. The guy that played opposite of him, Merrill Noel, he's graduated. He's on to the NFL, went to the Bills, actually, as an undrafted free agent, was recently released. So he's bouncing around trying to find a home in the NFL. But they thought that they had some replacements there for those 2 veteran guys in their secondary, and Brad Watson and Bryant Gross-Armiento. Now, the 2 of them both missed spring practice. Brad Watson had a wrist injury. He has since recovered, and he's starting to go. He's starting to be a full go at Wake Forest fall practice. But Bryant Gross-Armiento, who is hopefully going to be opposite of him, tore his ACL. And they're hoping that he comes back sometime in the middle of the season. But right now, he just doesn't look like he's ready to go full speed. He's still rehabbing and recovering from that injury. So with that being the case, Dionte Austin, he's a 4-star true freshman recruit there. He might be thrown into the fire, just as Wake Forest has thrown a bunch of their players into the fire here. A lot of young guys getting playing time here early in their careers. But Dionte Austin could see time, unfortunately, in this case, because you would hope that he would be able to learn from the guys up in front of him, the veteran guys, and learn how to be a college football defensive back. But we'll just see how well he'll play in the secondary. They also have a decent linebacker group led by Brandon Chubb. He's the cousin of Georgia running back Nick Chubb. He's a very good player, very athletic there on the outside, and could do a lot of different things there on the defensive end for Wake Forest. So all in all, their defense won't be too bad. Hopefully they can replace their key cogs in the secondary from last year and just be serviceable again, and hopefully the offense improves. And with that, I think Wake will improve.
Mike McDaniel joining us from inside the ACC. So what we have is a historically bad offense that doesn't look to get much better despite a freshman quarterback who's got 12 games under his belt, no playmakers, bad offensive line. The defense, not bad, but they lose some of their better players from a decent, to be kind, defense. So who knows, maybe the defense takes a step back, hopefully not. But the one thing they do attract, Mike, to Wake Forest, place kicker and punter. They're in decent shape there.
Yeah, how ironic is that they're place kicking and punting is some of the best in the conference with as bad as their team has been. But thank God their punter's good. Alex Canal, he's a native Australian, which makes him unique to the ACC to have a guy come from all the way across the world to play college football and to punt. And he is a very, very good player. Last year he had 81 punts, over 3,500 yards of punting. So that's just a testament to how bad the offense was for Wake Forest last year. But 43.6 yards per attempt, and that he's one of the top punters in the ACC, if not the entire country. And they also have a place kicker named Jimmy Newman. He's going to be a senior this year. He's accounted for 224 points for Wake Forest over his first 3 years, and that's 4th in school history. Also, going into his senior year, he's converted 77% of his kicking attempts. That's the most accurate kicker in school history there for Wake Forest. So they have some reliable special teams players despite all of the holes they may have on the offensive side of the ball and some holes in their defense as well.
Mike, I understand MarkRogersTV has rated this as the 7th most difficult schedule in the ACC. So this is my formula, Mike, for possibly getting Wake. This is the unthinkable, to postseason play. So they start off their first 4. They're winnable games. Elon at Syracuse, which will probably prove to be the deciding game for last place in the division. At Army and Indiana. They could go 1-3, or they could go 4-0, or something in between. Indiana's probably going to be a slight favorite, even on the road at Wake Forest. Then it gets brutal. after there. So they would have to somehow scrape together 2 wins if they get off to a 4-0 start, scrape together 2 wins against the likes of Florida State, Boston College, North Carolina State, and then listen to this stretch: Louisville, Notre Dame, Clemson, and Duke. So it's probably going to be a rough ride.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough ride, I think, for Wake Forest. Hopefully they'll be better than last year. I think the opening stretch of the season will tell us a lot about how much better this team could be. I don't think they're a bowl team, but I think that they could win 4 or 5 games, and I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility at all. You look at the Elon game in the opener, I think they can win that. At Syracuse, that'll be a tough game because it's at the Carrier Dome at 12:30 on a Saturday. Those Syracuse fans show up in that Carrier Dome. It's a pretty loud environment. But if Wake Forest can escape with that win, then they're looking at Army the following week at West Point. 3-0 potentially, heading into that Indiana game at home. Now, Indiana, like you said, will probably be a slight favorite. Indiana's one of the bottom teams in the Big Ten, year in and year out now, it seems. But that's a home game. So if they can go 3-0 and get to that Indiana game, that could be a very interesting matchup and a very important one for Wake Forest, I think, especially if they want to have any aspirations at all at getting to a bowl game. Because you look at that stretch like you were talking about, they got Florida State the following week after Indiana. That's most certainly going to be a loss, I would have to think, with the way that Florida State's been playing the last couple of years and just how bad Wake has been historically. At Boston College is an interesting one because I think Boston College is a pretty mediocre team in the ACC with a very, very good running back, John Hillman. He's going to be one of the key players to watch in the conference this season. But that's a game that they could win. I mean, that's a winnable contest. And then you look further down the schedule, you know, Duke's going to be tough there to close out the season. At Clemson, at Notre Dame, you have to think those are 2 losses. They play at home against Louisville, who's going to be very good. I think NC State's also going to be a pretty underrated team in the conference this year. That's probably going to be a loss. So when you look at this schedule, I think 4 wins is not out of the realm of possibility. I think they could get to 5. But getting to that 6th win is going to be pretty tough. And to do it, I think they'd have to upset somebody like Boston College or NC State to do that. And I'm just not sure they'll be able to this year. But I do think they'll improve.
Yeah, not best case scenario, but a reasonable expectation, I think, is you split the first 4, Elon, Syracuse, Army, Indiana. You go 2-2, and you steal 2 other wins against possibly between Boston College, North Carolina, Duke. Or maybe you need to go 3-1 and then steal another win, and you finish at 4-8 for Wake Forest. All right, Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC breaking down Wake Forest for us. Mike, thanks so much for the insight.
Thanks, Mark.